What's up, everybody? Welcome into Tom Curran's Patriots Talk podcast. Our great friend Brian Hoyer joins us today. Phil, how great is it to see Brian?
It's always great to see Brian. We finally got a smart person on the podcast. Devin McCourty first, now Brian Hoyer. This is great. We're having a great week.
Hey, one defensive guy, one offensive guy. You got to do it. Plus bald guys. I love you guys getting us some airtime.
Bald guys unite. Devin, then Brian. Back-to-back baldness. Some of us, however, like to visit Dr. Lepresti. Growth potential. He'll take care of your hair loss at any time you need it. So listen, with Tennessee, Cleveland, and the Giants all ahead of the Patriots, but all perhaps looking at quarterbacks, the Patriots still could be in business with the number 4 overall pick. They could have their pick of the litter unless Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter goes. So let's just unspool that for a minute. Brian Hoyer, as a quarterback, what would you want first in a vacuum? A left tackle or a high-end wideout?
I'm going to go the Joe Burrow route and say high-end wideout. Look at what it's done for him and Jamar Chase. And I will say this, I have a little bit of bias and knowledge here as well, knowing how Josh McDaniels can operate an offensive system and provide help to the tackles. And I said this all year last year. There was times where I questioned, like, why are they not helping with chips? Why are they not helping with the tight end slamming the defensive end? I'm not saying Josh wants somebody that's a bum out there, but he understands offensively how you can provide extra help to those guys. And so to me, and I've always heard this, if you're drafting in that position, the top 5, you want obviously a quarterback, but you want someone who either sacks the quarterback, scores touchdowns, or shuts down guys out on the outside. And so to me, look, lineman is great, but I think you have an offensive coordinator who knows how to protect the edge. They will teach Drake Maye not to get too deep in the pocket. And so to me, I'm choosing Travis Hunter over an offensive tackle every single time, if he's there. I mean, that's the big question, right? How do these picks ahead of them go? And now the big question would be, if you get Abdul Carter or Travis Hunter, which one do you pick? And to me, as a quarterback, I want Travis Hunter. But as a team, you add Abdul Carter to what you've done already on the defensive front. I mean, that's a volatile defensive front 7.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation, too, if you factor Abdul Carter into the mix. And I don't know if both of those guys would be available, but I guess you never know, right? So if you had the choice, I did talk to one assistant coach recently who said to me, listen, it's a big man's game. And so if you got an opportunity to take a big man who's going to sack the quarterback, and he looks like he could be a Micah Parsons type. I had another coach tell me recently, defensive assistant, like this guy has shades of Von Miller as a prospect coming out of college. Abdul Carter does. So that would be really hard to pass on. But if the choice, Tom, is between tackle and receiver, I'm with Brian here too. As dire as it looks at left tackle right now for the Patriots, I think I want the high-end playmaker, because they have just been, I think, really held hostage by that position for a long time. I know you could say the same about left tackle, but I feel better about your ability to maybe mitigate that in some of the ways Brian described, as opposed to, man, you just need some talent on the outside, and I think Travis Hunter would give you exactly that.
It really comes down to this.
I will say this. I'm talking about Travis Hunter only, too. I'm not talking about Tet McMillan. I'm talking about it at 4. The only receiver that I'm taking is Travis Hunter. And I've come out and said, I believe he's a full-time receiver, which to me, knowing how those meetings go, you have to put the time in to know where to line up, what the plays are going to be, what the route concepts are. There's alerts in this system. That's where you're going to spend most of your time. And Devin would not like to hear me say this, but our play calls compared to defensive play calls are a little bit harder to learn. And so if you want to use him primarily as a receiver and then say, hey, look, on third down or on passing downs, we have a little package that you're going to be a part of in our nickel or our dime, and it's going to be very limited to man coverage, which is super simple. You and Phil would know, all right, it's the same as when I go watch my daughter's 5th grade basketball game. I have number 24. I have number 82. That's all. Hey, Travis, when you go out to play corner, we're playing man, you got this guy. And then you throw in a little zone package where it's cover 2 and he jams the receiver and he plays the flat. That's very easy to learn, as opposed to learning an entire offense. And the one thing is, if you make him a part-time offensive player, what does that do when he comes on the field? The alert is going off on the other team's defense. Hey, he's in the game. They're going to be something. I think he's more valuable as a full-time receiver. And I also think if you're drafting him there, you're drafting him to be the receiver to help Drake Maye, not to put him on the defense side of the ball. You just signed Carlton Davis.
Exactly.
You have one of the best young corners in the game in Christian Gonzalez. So to me, that's if Travis Hunter's not there, and Abdul Carter's not there at 4, I got to imagine they got to be willing to trade back.
And I agree with that. The interesting thing about this is, they did sign Carlton Davis too, to $20 million a year contract. They have Christian Gonzalez on the other side. Travis Hunter is not going to come in and unseat either of those players. So it would be a waste if the Patriots drafted Travis Hunter and said, you're going to be dedicated 80-20 defense. It would make no sense at all. And if Travis Hunter doesn't like it, I think it would probably be appropriate to remind him, you're 22. You just finished getting off a bus going to high school about 4 years ago. We have adults here with families, mouths to feed. Shut up and go play over there. And maybe he wouldn't like.
Has that been a thing? As he said, he does not want to play receiver. I haven't seen that anywhere.
No,
he really wants to play both ways.
He really wants to play both
ways.
And there actually has been some reporting that if he had to focus on one, that he might actually lean on the offensive side. And that might be due in part to, until this Derek Stingley contract that got handed out recently, receivers are plain and simple. The high end guys are making more money than corners, and so that would be a smart play for him, quite frankly.
The interesting thing is, you're talking about drafting at 4 overall a receiver who doesn't really play receiver and is just a blob of clay, which really goes to the conversation of how flawed this draft is relative to some other drafts. You get Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas and all the other guys who came out last year. You have the quarterbacks who came out last year as opposed to the group that's there this year. And it's really interesting. So the bust potential for Abdul Carter, the bust potential for Travis Hunter is exponentially higher, I think, than a left tackle. But your point is good. Like, I'm sitting there. I made the case on Tuesday. I said, fix the left tackle position. I'm tired of watching it. I can't watch that position hold the Patriots hostage anymore. But when it comes down to it, if you play left tackle all game at an all-pro level, nothing really happens. You give the opportunity for things to happen. You can have a pedestrian left tackle who screws up 5 or 6 different plays. But on the one play that he makes, gives you enough protection, he finds that high-end wideout who scores 6 for you on a play that nobody else on your team could make. So I'd probably take Travis Hunter, but the bust potential at 4, the dice roll for the Patriots at 4 is much higher, I think. Phil, you're doing that. Phil Squint, what do you think?
It's interesting, and I'd love to hear what Brian has to say, because I think some of the recent history in terms of these positions, and again, we're not talking specifically about Hunter, or if we're talking left tackle, Will Campbell or Armand Membu, but like, you've seen teams whiff on tackles, and you've seen busts, quote unquote, at tackle, which you would just assume, well, you take a big enough guy, an athletic enough guy, you're going to get somebody who hits. But I'm looking back at recent drafts, 2022, Ike Ekwonu, Evan Neal, both guys that were taken in the top 10, both have been very disappointing. 2021, Alex Leatherwood at 17 was like the definition of a bust. In 2020, Jedrick Wills, who's now a free agent, drafted number 10 overall. The following pick was Mekhi Becton at 11 overall. Both those guys are whiffs. I know Mekhi Becton just played well and had a good year at guard for Philly, but he's had to really resurrect his career. So it is possible to miss on those guys, Tom. And Brian, I would look at
the context. Context.
And on the other side of that, you're seeing fewer and fewer misses at the receiver position, especially early in the first round. Brian, I don't know if you think there's a reason for that, or if that applies to Travis Hunter because he is such of sort of a unique prospect in that he's playing both positions. He probably hasn't even focused all that much on receiver relative to some other players. So I'd be curious your thoughts as to why maybe, or where you see the bust potential for both of those spots.
Well, I think when it comes to the offensive line, specifically tackle, unless you're drafting Joe Thomas, who is a blue chip, perennial Pro Bowler, going to go to the Hall of Fame, a guy like Joe Alt, there's not a guy like that in this draft. So I would say any of these tackles, I would say, have that potential. I also look at it the way that they're expected to come in and perform. They're going against the elite of the elite pass rushers each and every game. And a lot of offenses don't try to provide them any help. And which is why I look at what Josh does on offense. He knows he's going to provide those help. Even when you have a stud left tackle, he's still going to chip these guys because he knows having those defensive ends just think about, I don't have a clean path to the quarterback on every play, is a huge factor. And so a lot of these guys get drafted. They're expected to be, the left tackle and basically block these guys one-on-one the entire game. It just doesn't work that way. And so I think Josh has the ability to make sure that he provides support to those guys. And also to Tom's point, like, you're going to notice Travis Hunter's impact a lot more than you are the left tackle. I promise you that. It's just the way it is. And when I look at Travis Hunter, I think he's so intriguing because he played both positions so well. But when I watch him as a receiver, he's got strong hands. He catches the ball. He's looking to score. He catches the ball, whether it's a hitch across the middle. He's got the mentality of a Jamar Chase. And I see shades of the type of receiver that he will be once he becomes a predominant receiver and spends the majority of his time. He has the ability to be a Justin Jefferson, a Jamison Williams, a Devonta Smith, a guy who, he's tall, he's lean, he's skinny, but he's physical. I mean, he goes up and pulls the ball away from DBs. I really love the skill set that he brings. And I know some people say, we don't even know if he could play receiver in the NFL. I think that's absolutely crazy.
How much better can the addition of Josh, the second year of Drake, a new offensive line coach, overall stable atmosphere, add to the Patriots offense? Because we've been watching a week of free agency, Brian, and Morgan Moses and Mac Hollins are really the main guys signed. Center to Garrett Bradbury, in for David Andrews, who we'll talk about a little bit in a moment. But how much can the offense improve just by osmosis because of last year's tumult, Phil?
I think it will be vastly improved. Obviously, I have a little bit of bias and background information having worked with Josh for such a long time, but he's going to come in and he has a certain philosophy when it comes to offense. He doesn't want to have negative plays. What did we see last year from the Patriots? A lot of negative plays, a lot of penalties. He's not going to put up with that. And I'm sure Doug Marrone, who I don't know, but I know through people who have coached with them, and I know that he's not going to put up with that either. And so Josh will use scheme to kind of overcome. And look, it wasn't for lack of trying, right? The reports that they went out and tried to sign Godwin to a big deal. I know they were in on Will Freeze at the guard position. It wasn't for lack of trying. They went out and tried to do those things, and now they'll have to build it more through the draft. But I do think the stability that Josh will bring, the type of offense that he will bring in, and look, I know we've all raved about Drake and his skill set. And I think that year off for Josh, going around and visiting different places, whether it's the pro level or the college level, he's going to be able to use Drake's athleticism and add different wrinkles to the offense. Some that we were calling for to see last year and we didn't see really till the end of the year. I think you'll see a lot of that right from the get-go.
It's really going to be interesting just to see how much pressure is on Josh McDaniels to make this work, because if they're going to get much better between now and the start of the season, I think it's got to be through the draft. They're meeting as we speak. They're meeting with Stefon Diggs. He was in last night. We're taping this on Thursday morning. He's going to go through a physical. He's obviously coming off an injury, but I don't know. I think he could make an impact. I just don't think he's like that game-changing number one receiver that he used to be. And so they've got to become more of a destination, Tom, to attract these guys, whether it's Cam Robinson, who I was told they were actually in on, or Chris Godwin, or anybody else that said no to them. Ronnie Stanley knew they were plenty interested and that he'd get more here than he got in Baltimore. You know, you've got these guys that are just saying thanks, but no thanks. And the only way to get out of that is to start winning some games. And a lot of that is going to fall on Josh McDaniels to be able to scheme it up, because this is, again, not going to be the most talented offense in the league in all likelihood.
When you talk, too, about Stefon Diggs, let's veer a little bit. I didn't put that in my plan, which I should have. But, Phil, you mentioned last week in the process of reporting out what was going on with the Patriots in the in free agency. After DK Metcalf signed with the Steelers, you said the Patriots didn't make an offer. And I kind of construed that from conversations that I had that centered around what the Patriots were looking for. I said time and again after conversations that the Patriots are really concerned about surrounding Drake Maye and making sure his huddle is productive, non-controversial. He's in charge. So when they didn't make an offer to DK Metcalf, as you reported, I kind of put one and one together in a way that I should not have, and said, well, they weren't interested. As we've come to learn, they were interested in DK Metcalf. They weren't over the moon. They weren't Chris Godwin competing, but they were in on him. They are now obviously in on Stefon Diggs. So I think there's a sliding scale of interest in these guys.
Yes.
We're going to start with Chris Godwin. That's our option A, as Vrabel termed it. But option B, if we have to swallow hard and see our way clear to pursuing a guy who might be a little bit more vocal about needing the football than they'd prefer for a second-year quarterback, they will do that. So it was done with DK Metcalf, to kind of put that toothpaste back in the tube. It was done with Cam Robinson, as you just mentioned. And they're doing it now with Stefon Diggs, who can be a pain in the posterior. Brian, should the Patriots be swallowing hard and welcoming in the opportunity to bring in guys who can be a pain in the ass? And under what guidelines do you approach that guy?
Yeah, I think each situation is a case-by-case scenario. And I think the one thing about DK, like, you're going to have to trade and pay a lot of money. The one thing I would say about Stefon Diggs, obviously we saw a lot of him over the years when he was in Buffalo. And the one thing I would say, you have a little bit of inside information, because don't forget, Josh's brother, Ben, is the receiver coach down in Houston. And they brought Stefon Diggs down there to work with a young quarterback in CJ Stroud. And he wasn't as vocal. Now, I know he got his season ended shortly because of the ACL. Mm-hmm. But the one thing you got to remember about Josh's offense, he wants route runners. He wants guys that can be multiple. And I think the one thing about DK is he has a limited route tree. And so bringing in a guy like Stefon Diggs.
You meant DK, right?
It's DK. Yeah, Diggs is a tremendous route runner. Yeah, Diggs is a tremendous route runner, would be a great fit for that system. And look, I've never played with a good receiver who doesn't want the football. Randy Moss, we would look over and say, hey, Randy, what'd you have? And no matter what the play was or what the coverage was, he'd give us the touchdown signal like this, no matter what. and when I played with DeAndre Hopkins, it didn't matter. I remember playing against the Patriots when I was playing for Houston. They double-teamed him every play, and he came over and said, I don't even care. Just throw it to me. So you want that dog in your top receiver. And I think as Stefon gets older, he's coming off of injury, he's going to learn how to use that to motivate him, but also realize you're with a young guy. So if it ends up here in New England, I think it's a good fit. And I think one thing that'll be overlooked is the Mac Hollins signing, but I love that for this offense. He's going to be the guy who goes in and blocks the safety. He's going to get a lot of play action passes off of that. When I was out in Vegas, he had just spent a year there with Josh, and the guys loved him. I mean, they loved Mac Hollins, and I think that's a great addition. You're going to have a guy who I know he's not a number one receiver, maybe not even a two. But he's a big guy. He's physical. He's going to contribute on special teams. And what he did for Buffalo last year as a receiver, I thought was tremendous. So I love that pickup. And the one thing that was kind of a theme I saw from all of the signings that the Patriots made, they signed for fit and the type of people they want to bring in here. And you know as well as I do the type of culture that Vrabel's trying to build. And I think they went out and got Robert Spillane. I don't know if there's ever been a guy I played with who fits in more of what that Patriot mold is. I mean, this guy is as throwback as they come. I love him as a teammate in Vegas. And so when I saw him sign here, I knew he had originally started his career in Tennessee with Vrabel. I mean, the people are going to love this guy. He's going to have a cult following similarly
that kind of makes the point,
Danny Woodheads. Yeah.
It makes the point, though, that it's a dice roll to go and give 15, 18, 20 to Stefon Diggs, who kind of shot his way out of Minnesota and kind of shot his way out of Buffalo. And as productive as he is, 47 catches in half the season last year, Phil, he was going to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but it changes the atmosphere after you've spent all this time bringing in Morgan Moses and Bobby Spillane and you name it.
Well, and that's the thing. Again, you used the words sliding scale earlier. I don't know if he's going to be getting the kind of money that you're talking about there, right, Tom. Like, to me, my guess is it's going to be much less than that. And so you might be willing to, whether it's Cam Robinson, who had some football character concerns, or Stefon Diggs, who has the reputation that he has. And I got some stuff here from people who have worked with him in the past that I want to share with you guys in terms of maybe his evolving attitude and his evolving approach in the locker room or with a given offense. But that sliding scale factors money in too, right? If you're going to bring somebody in who's going to be a little bit of a dink and he doesn't want to practice and he's not going to do the right things from, Monday to Saturday, and then on Sunday he's also in everybody's ear and he's making demands, you can't make that guy your highest paid player or your second highest paid player in all likelihood. If he's your 15th highest paid player, but he's going to give you competent left tackle play or he's going to give you competent receiver play, well, then I think it does start to become a conversation. And just really quickly on Diggs, I talked to two people last night, one staffer who was with him in Minnesota, one who was with him in Houston, so sort of both ends of the spectrum on his career. And the Minnesota person said, yeah, he was a handful, but he could play. And we didn't mind that he would complain about getting the football because as long as you can produce, you sort of earn that right to complain. And you just know that that's part of the gig. And that's something that you have to deal with as a staff and as an offense. Now, a person in Houston said he got along with everybody here. Everybody liked him, good teammate, worked hard. I don't think there were any noticeable issues. He understood Nico Collins was the guy. And so that brings up an interesting little wrinkle here too, Brian. Like if he comes here, Stefon Diggs might be the guy. Like he might come to this receiver room and look at it and say, who's better than me here? Like in Houston, it was Nico, so I had to keep my mouth shut. But now, if I'm not getting it on 3rd and 8, like I'm going to be over talking to number 10 or I'm going to be over talking to Josh McDaniels. I'm not going to be happy about it. Do you think they might have to get even one other receiver on top of Diggs, even if they're able to sign him, Brian?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, we just talked about the draft center. I don't think if you sign Stefon Diggs, I don't think that precludes you from going out and drafting Travis Hunter as well. I think he's at the point of his career where he still can play. Obviously, we got to see where he comes back from that ACL injury, but it doesn't mean he's the number one guy. And like you said, I don't think the numbers are going to be as high as maybe people think, and we'll see how they fit. But like you just said, you talked to someone in Houston. I already know before they brought him in, I'm sure Josh talked to his brother and said, all right, what's the deal? Is this guy, am I going to be able to work with this guy? And if it wasn't the case and they didn't think that the culture they're building could handle a guy like that, I'm sure he wouldn't be here visiting. So plus you got to wonder what his options are at this point too. So when your options are limited, you're more willing to change and adapt. And so we'll see if this comes to fruition or not. But I don't think that even if you sign Stefon Diggs, you don't try to go out and if Travis Hunter's there at 4, you don't add him as well.
What do you think is going on in a meeting with a guy like Stefon Diggs? Is he selling himself more than the Patriots are selling themselves at this juncture, Brian? Who has to?
I'm sure it's probably mutual.
Diggs might be here to create buzz around him that has been non-existent so far.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of it is both. Like getting to know each other, have those meetings. I think this is obviously what free agency wish you could be, but obviously now everybody signs the day of the tampering period. We already know where people are going, but to get in and see if it's the right fit. And I'm sure a big part of it is the physical too. I'm sure he's getting poked and prodded and they want to see exactly how far along he is in the recovery. And they take the images of your knee. I mean, every free agent visit I went to, immediately the first thing they sent you to was the medical staff. So I'm sure that's a big part of it as well. And we'll see how this plays out. I'm sure they'll have the meetings, they'll see, is it a fit? And then it comes to the numbers and hopefully that they're not too far apart if they want to make this happen.
Tom, I know you want to get to Joe Milton. Let's get to Joe Milton.
I do. All right, do it. Brian, you had a strong statement on Joe Milton. Phil and I watched the video. We used it on Early Edition last night. And I don't know, John Henry, if you can find that video for our YouTube viewers. Here is Brian Hoyer talking on the potential of Joe Milton. For you YouTube viewers, watch the reaction of the host on the left.
To me, when I watch the film, I would take Joe Milton over any of the quarterbacks in the draft this year. Now, there's hindsight there because he's already in the NFL. And the Patriots have kind of dangled like they want a 3rd-round pick, which probably means they'd take a 4th-round pick. But when you watch the tape and you watch what Joe Milton is capable of doing, if he was in this draft, he would be in the talk to be the number 1 quarterback.
All right, so we were on TV last night, and I hadn't seen that clip until we were live on TV, and Phil could not get over the reaction of the big fella.
Amazing.
Whose eyebrows went shooting off his head.
Yeah, Ken Carman, that's who it is.
So what do you think? Joe Milton, let's talk conceptually first, and then I'm gonna try and pull something out on this a little bit. But a 3rd, huh? If he was in this draft right now, he looks like the best player to you. And that's based on what he just accomplished in his first year. It's not based on if all things were equal coming out of Tennessee.
Right. That's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at a guy who has a year of being a professional quarterback under his belt. And we all watched him in the preseason. And luckily for me, venturing into this media career, I got to cover the games with the Patriots and get in the production meetings. And I came away very impressed from his demeanor, the way he looked at the game. And then he went out and did it. Every time he had a chance to play, I think we all walked away and said, wow, I mean, they have something here. Obviously, Drake Maye is the future, but this guy is legit. And people will say, he's playing against backups. That last game against Buffalo, those are legit 53-man roster players. They are not going out there to put anything bad on film other than their best. And he made them look silly at some point. I mean, what did he complete? Like the first 15 passes he attempted, and they weren't just like easy passes. He made plays that are hard look easy. I never knew how athletic he was. He's running the ball. He's scrambling. I mean, the one play that got called back because of the holding was one of the most incredible plays by any quarterback the entire season of the NFL. Yep. So to me, as I'm sitting here analyzing these quarterbacks in the draft through all the different various things that I've been doing, whether it's Sirius XM or talking weekly there on the Cleveland radio station, Joe Milton is vastly more talented than these guys. And I get it. He didn't have the college career that allowed him to be a high draft pick last year, but guys can change. Guys can learn how to play the position. And a lot of that credit would be to him sitting in a room with Alex Van Pelt, which I know we kind of poo-poo, but a guy who played the position for a long time, coaches well, and being in a room with Jacoby Brissett, the ultimate veteran. I think Joe took a lot away from that year. And you're telling me if you're one of these teams in the draft that need a quarterback, if Joe Milton was in this draft, knowing what you know now, you wouldn't take him with a third round pick? I think those teams would take him in a heartbeat. And so I think as these teams play this game of quarterback musical chairs with Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston and the way the draft plays out, I think Joe Milton is a very viable option for all of those teams.
I think if you're the Patriots, you have to consider, okay, like worst case scenario, do we want the kind of insurance policy that Joe Milton might provide, right? If Drake Maye gets hurt and we need somebody for a month or month and a half, like, is he so enticing as a talent and what he showed at the end of last year that actually would have so much value to us that we can't trade it? But Tom, I don't know if you can live that way. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if you can, like, I think he's a backup quarterback. Odds are he's not going to play very much here, and he's certainly not going to play very much meaningful football. And so I'm not even sure how much higher his value is going to get built playing, for instance, in the 2025 preseason over what he showed at the end of last year against like real 53 roster NFL caliber guys. Yep. So I might pull the trigger now and strike while the iron's hot if I was the Patriots.
Yeah, I'd say
I sent those guys that you mentioned, the Cleveland radio station afterwards. I sent the video of Joe playing in that game, and I said, just watch the plays he makes and understand this is already playing in the NFL. Are you telling me your team's going to be better off having Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward or Jackson Dart than what Joe Milton could provide for your team next year? I don't think so. And it would allow you to draft a more talented player with a high pick. But, you know, sometimes people aren't willing to think outside the box. And to me, it's as big of a risk to trade for him as it is to draft some of these guys in those high picks. So you really got to weigh that risk. And to your point, Phil, I don't know if his value is ever going to get higher than it is right now. I mean, there's always the chance that something were happened to Drake Maye and he played a solid 3 or 4 games. Now you're on a Jimmy Garoppolo situation where he becomes a valuable trade asset. But if you could flip a guy who was a 6th round pick last year to a 3rd or 4th round pick 1 year later, because you already know you have the franchise quarterback, I think you got to do it.
I think the dice roll for those teams at the top would be looking at Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward, any of the quarterbacks, Jalen Milroe, and then looking at Milton would be to say, but what's their ceiling? What are they going to look like after a year of coaching in the NFL? Will they already outstrip where Joe Milton is? And Joe was not the starter.
Physically,
obviously.
never. They'll never. Those guys physically will never get to Joe Milton's ceiling.
But Joe Milton's ceiling is based on arm strength. You understand better than anybody, and I'm not telling you.
That's what I'm saying.
You don't
physical.
know, so.
I'm saying physical traits. Him against any of those guys, they will never reach the physical ability ceiling of Joe Milton. Very few people could. But I also would say that he runs a 4.62. That's what they just looked it up this morning. Was on the radio talking about him on Sirius.
4.43.
But he can't throw the ball.
He's a little heavy
like Joe Milton, and he's short.
I like Joe Milton.
He's very, very. I mean, look, I'm not saying that you base everything on throwing ability. There's a lot more that goes into quarterback, but the strides that he made in 1 year and then to go out and show it, he was a different player in that last game for the Patriots than he was at his college. He took the check down. He didn't try to force a lot of plays. And so to me, that's not Joe Milton's ceiling. That's him climbing to that ceiling. And I think that's where I kind of come off looking at it like, what do these other guys do that he hasn't already done at the NFL level?
Like, think of a guy like Daniel Jones, or think of a guy like Sam Darnold, and throw out last year Sam Darnold and what happened in Minnesota. Why would you do that? Because I asked you to. There is a ceiling.
But I'm saying that people can improve, and their situation has a lot to do.
Like, Daniel Jones hit his ceiling. We saw the best of Daniel Jones, most likely. Maybe he'll have a great year down the road.
I mean, the year he had with Dayball in that first season, I would say was a pretty good year. I mean, if he would stay healthy and continue to play like that.
Very good year.
Then
what I'm saying
really
is there's a ceiling for everyone. And what's the ceiling going to be for Joe Milton, Shedeur Sanders, all those other guys? So to me, you look at it and you sell high with Joe Milton, because I think he'll be a competent player. Could he be a top 20 quarterback in the league? Absolutely. But it's the enticement of Shedeur Sanders, Cam Wood. We've never seen him in the NFL. We haven't seen him throw 4 picks yet. So, but I would sell high on Joe Milton. Phil?
The last thing for me on this is the one hurdle that the Patriots might face in trying to deal him, and this is, what I have heard from other executives who are going to be in the hunt for quarterbacks, is that there are times where ego can get in the way. And if you're an evaluator or specifically a general manager and you passed on Joe Milton 5 or 6 times, it's really hard to make that argument to yourself. Well, I know we need a quarterback, but in my mind, based on all the Tennessee eval and Michigan eval that I did on Joe Milton, there's no way I can argue to myself, never mind my owner. How embarrassing would that be? I got to go to my owner and say, we got to give up a 3rd-round pick now for Joe Milton when we could have spent a 4th or a 5th on him last year and had him last year. And the ego part of it might actually hinder the Patriots' ability to get the kind of offer that they really would like in a deal like this.
Trust me, I've seen that, but I would make the case that all 4 of those teams actually went into last year feeling pretty good about their quarterback situation. I mean, the Browns went in with Deshaun Watson. The Steelers had Russell Wilson. The Giants were hoping that Daniel Jones would return to form, and the Titans had Will Levis, who they were kind of all in on. So I don't think any of them were probably sitting there saying, man, maybe we should be looking at Joe Milton as a guy who can down the road become the eventual starter. I think things change. And trust me, I get what you're saying. Ego is involved in a lot of decisions when it comes to our league. But I think if you're really looking at it and you're really just evaluating it on a player by player basis, based on what you know now of Joe Milton, and I know that hindsight is 2020 and what he's done, he's already done at the NFL level. These other guys, I mean, look, there's people saying that Shedeur Sanders could fall to the 2nd round. And so are you willing to take a guy with a high pick who some people think shouldn't even be drafted in the 1st round and not maybe take a chance at a guy like Joe Milton? I don't know. I'm not in that position, but for me, when I watch the guys play, I get more excited about what Joe Milton did as an NFL player already than what those guys do in the college level.
I agree. He's a lot of fun to watch. He is, no doubt. And I just think it's fascinating because when you're projecting guys from different years, all of that conversation is fun as hell. Brian is playing hurt today, and he's already done several hours of serious radio. So I want to hit these 2 final items as quickly as possible. First, David Andrews, you're very close with him. You do a podcast with him, the Quick Snap podcast. Was he done dirty in your mind by the New England Patriots in his final year or in the release?
Look, having the relationship I had with David, when he texted me that he was getting released, I thought he was joking. To me, he had been working out. He's trying to rehab to get back. But look, he talked about it on our podcast. Does he respect their decision? Sure. Does he like it? Not at all. And to your point, I saw you guys talking about it. I think there were some things that were happening behind the scenes with the Patriots making offers for certain players. They didn't want that to get back to David, and they said, look, we gotta address this situation. And sometimes it doesn't always come together in the way that you might want it to happen. So to me, he's the ultimate Patriot. He's a Patriot Hall of Famer, a guy who came in as an undrafted player, worked his way to, I believe, an 8-time team captain. And really, to me, when I think of like what a Patriot is, he's one of the first people that come to mind, along with James White, along with Devin McCourty, along with Matthew Slater, going back to my early years, Kevin Falk, Matt Light. So I hold him in very high regard to what that organization was supposed to look like, not just on the field, but off the field. Look, at some point we all get fired. I told David, I said, I know it doesn't make it any easier, but I've been fired by the Patriots a lot. And each time it never got any easier. I mean, so being done dirty, I think it did catch him by surprise. He talked about that on our podcast. But I think at the end, he understands, the business side of it. He's coming off of major shoulder surgery. They were trying to make moves. And sometimes the timing of all those things kind of coincide, and you try to handle it the best way you can.
Yeah, I think that knee-jerk reaction from the fan base, Phil, which is David Andrews, which would be the same as yours, which was the same as mine, leads you immediately to believe, well, that's cold. But there is, excuse me, some nuance, I think, to these situations where when you look at them from 30,000 feet, as I pointed out last week, it would have been really shitty to bring him into camp when you basically had already decided we're moving on. Why lead the guy on? But I think that when they inevitably tell me Phil's taking over for you, I wouldn't mind watching Phil. But don't do that face, Phil. You know what's coming.
Stop it. Can I ask a nerdy football X's and O's thing to Brian here? Because he has a unique perspective. And this is about the center position, but you're as close to that position as anybody without playing it. Two different schemes for the guy that is now going to be replacing David Andrews, Garrett Bradbury. The scheme that he's going to be playing in Josh McDaniels, and the scheme that he's coming from, which I'm sure has changed over the years, but is sort of all under the same umbrella of being one of these, wide zone offenses, whether it's with Kevin O'Connell or Kevin Stefanski or the Kubiaks, et cetera. Is he going to be able to transition Bradbury and be, the kind of David Andrews replacement that Patriots fans are going to want to see? I think they're going to be really upset, Brian, if we get to 2025. And I think that's what made the Andrews release hard, is there's no obvious answer behind David. It wasn't like they were done with him and they were bringing up the guy that they had drafted in the second round and he was ready to go. Like, I think there are still real questions about Bradbury as well. So how do you see that transition going from one scheme to the next for a guy like this?
Yeah, well, you got to imagine they didn't make that move with David anticipating that Bradbury was going to be released, and they must have been in on Dahlman. I don't know anything. You guys would know better than me, but there were some other centers out there that maybe they were after, and it just didn't work out. I think it'd actually be an easier transition for Bradbury going from the West Coast scheme, where a lot of the ownness on making mic points and things were on the center, whereas now that's going to be Drake Maye's job. And I think in a way it'll be good for them to learn together. I think David would have loved to have been there to be a part of kind of reestablishing that type of offense when it came to the protection scheme, the run game, all of those things. But now you're going to have a center and a quarterback learning it together at the same time. And the one thing that Scar always said to all of us, the quarterbacks and the offensive line, when it came to that system, was we got to see it through one set of eyes. And so I think they're all going to learn it together. They have a great offensive line coach in Doug Marrone. Josh, to me, what makes him such a great offensive coordinator is he can go in each individual room and be that position coach. He knows the offense that far in and out. And they're going to learn it all together. And Drake is going to take that ownership over it. And there was times where I'd be in there, whether it was David or Ryan Wendell or Rich Orenberg, when I would play, and we would have to have a conversation at the line of scrimmage. How do you see this front? Is it an over front? Is it an under front? Is it an even? Is it a diamond front, which that's what the old Bear defense was. We called it a diamond front, and have those conversations. And then based off of that, being on the same page, make that mic point. And then the center basically relays everything down to the rest of the offensive line. So look, it's going to be Drake's job, and then that will transfer to Bradbury, and you hope that they just kind of gel and learn it together and then see it both the same way when they get up there and there's a front that's a little funky, and how are you going to identify it, and who are you going to make the mic call? So look, by all instances, from the people I've talked to and the people who play with Drake, he's extremely intelligent, learned on the run, on the fly last year, very rarely made the same mistake twice. So I think he will flourish in this system.
Last question. It has been proposed that the tush push be outlawed. The owners will vote on it. in the near future at the owners' meetings. Brian, where do you come down on the tush push and the banning of all pushing of tushes?
Yeah, just talked with about this with Solomon Wilcots on our show this morning. I mean, look, the reality is I don't even think Philadelphia needs to push Jalen Hurts. They're the ones who kind of really implemented this. And when you watch the quarterback sneaks, I mean, they're getting it no matter what. This guy squats like 650 pounds, and very rarely does the running back pushing him ever make the play any better than what it was going to be. I get it. I mean, I don't think that's what football was invented to be. I think if you wanted to make a rule where pushing a runner from behind the line of scrimmage, but down the field, I think it's fair game. When we've seen these plays over the years where the running back or the receiver gets in a scrum and here come the big boys, the way we taught them to come and push the pile. I think that's part of the game. I mean, how many times Bill would show us film from like the 40s and the 50s, and a lot of times the football looked like rugby anyways. I think there's a certain rule, whether you want to say from the quarterback getting the ball under center, you can't push them. Okay, I'm fine with that. But ultimately, I don't think it really matters that much. We saw the Buffalo Bills try the tush push in the playoff game, and it didn't work for them. So I get it. People want to talk about player safety. You don't want to be on the bottom of that pile. You don't want to be one of those D linemen who's trying to get leverage and go underneath the guy and cut people's knees out. But that's going to happen on a quarterback sneak regardless whether the guy pushes them or not. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes over throughout the rest of the league.
I kind of feel like, yes, it wouldn't be talked about unless the Eagles were having so much success with it. So it is. So hey, they can't do that. Well, they can. There's no rule against it. Yeah, but we
Right.
better make a rule. So I do get that, but it does not look like a football play. It's a rugby play. You can't pull the runner, so that's aiding a runner. I feel like you can't push a runner either. I've never liked the pushing of the runner, even downfield.
Yeah. But what about the scrum downfield?
So that's the thing. I like that too, but I think Brian's proposal of maybe you make the rule just you can't do it behind the line of scrimmage, or you can't do it with the quarterback under center. Like specifically make it that. Like I'd be okay with that.
Tear-assing downfield and launching themselves into already upright piles.
We love that.
Give me more of that.
I think it's
that's what when we watch the film. When we watch the
somebody's going to get hurt. What about the kids?
When we watch the film
Think about the kids.
Monday, when we watch the film on Monday, those are the plays that you say like these are the linemen we want. Guys who are going to go after they
we talk about unprotected. The guys in the scrum who are already trying to make a tackle are unprotected.
They shouldn't have been standing there. Shouldn't have been standing there.
It shouldn't have been standing there. That's right.
They know what they got into.
I don't mind banning pushing from behind.
All right.
Not globally, not universally.
Good to know.
Just in football. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put a cork in it right now. Brian, thanks so much. Go get some Bigelow tea. Phil, you're a terrific guy.
You guys are the best. Thanks for being with us, Brian.
Be with you guys.
Appreciate you, buddy.
All right.
Goodbye.
See ya.